Good morning everyone. Welcome to the session for IBPS PO Mains 2018, and as a part of our mains preparation we are covering the concepts on GK, and under GK we have banking awareness. And in banking awareness today, this is the fourth session that I am doing for banking awareness, and this is the session on RBI and basic functions of RBI, an outline of RBI, some of the rates and ratios that we need to know regarding Reserve Bank of India. Okay. So let's start with understanding what all we are going to see in this particular session. First of all, we have a brief overview of RBI, which I have already covered earlier also, but I'm just going to quickly recapture that. Brief overview of RBI, focus on functions of RBI, the associates of RBI, RBI monetary policy, and open market operations of RBI. So these are the things that we are going to cover in the session today, and let's start with first seeing a brief overview of RBI, Reserve Bank of India. As you can see, the symbol of RBI is on the screen. It contains a tiger and a palm tree, so that can also come as a question. What is in the symbol or seal of RBI? There's a tiger and a palm tree that you can see very clearly. Now let's look at a brief overview of RBI. We have discussed this earlier also about RBI. When did it start? It started in 1935 after the as a culmination of findings of the Hilton-Young Commission, and I discussed with you that the Hilton-Young Commission was formed in 1921. If you see the first session of banking awareness, that is on the history of banking in India, part 1, clear? And that is the pre-independence phase of banking in our country. The Reserve Bank of India Act. Now the RBI was formed in 1935 on the basis of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 provided the framework for setting up the Reserve Bank of India, right? And till today, if you see, we are using this act, RBI Act 1934, as a guiding act for how RBI should function. What are the powers of RBI? What are the functions of RBI? What are the key you can say considerations that RBI has to keep in mind regarding the banks in our country, and also regarding the scheduled banks in our country. All of the scheduled banks of our country are listed in the second schedule of Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. So two major acts are there in our country with respect to banking. One is the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 and the other is Banking Regulations Act of 1949. So ये दोनों एक्ट हम पहले भी एक बार देख चुके हैं. आप इन दोनों के बारे में क्लियर कट आइडिया आपको होना चाहिए. And also we have seen what happened with post independence. So post independence, RBI continued to function as a central bank of both India and Pakistan until June 1948. Clear? So ये बात आप समझिए कि जब इंडिपेंडेंस हो गया हमारा कंट्री, तो immediately we did not create a separate RBI only for India, because Pakistan, the country that was formed, required some time to set up the central bank. So our Reserve Bank of India continued to be the central bank of Pakistan till June of 1948, almost 1 year post independence. Later in September 1948, the government of India passed the Reserve Bank of India Transfer to Public Ownership Act 1948, where government bought all of the shares that were earlier owned by private shareholders, and that's what is called as nationalization of Reserve Bank of India happened in 1948. Transfer of shares to the government, to transfer all assets to the central government. In the following year, based on the provisions of the act, on 1st January 1949, Reserve Bank of India was nationalized. Based on the act passed in the year 1948, Reserve Bank of India was nationalized on the 1st January 1949. So that means Reserve Bank of India was the first nationalized bank in our country. It works as a central bank of our country. It's a primary bank which oversees all other banks in our country. It operates also as the overseer of our economic policy, the principal authority which prints and circulates currency in our country. Lots of other things are there that we need to understand regarding the functioning of RBI. So what are the functions of RBI? Now why are we studying all of these things? Because in the GK section of your PO mains examination, out of the 40 questions that you have in the GK section, you can expect up to 3 to 4 questions directly based on Reserve Bank of India, the policies of Reserve Bank of India, regarding the rates and ratios of Reserve Bank of India. So out of the 40 questions that are there in the GK section, the general awareness section of the banking examination, the PO examination, around 18 questions are from banking industry and around 22 questions are from current affairs, and some that are from current affairs also we have static GK. So out of the 18 questions that we have from the Reserve Bank, the banking industry, around 3 to 4 questions will be from Reserve Bank of India. So for those 3-4 questions, what can come? Now we are not going to have an in-depth and complete analysis of RBI Act and all those things, but overview. As a common person, as a general candidate, what all should you know regarding the central bank of our country? That is what is our main purpose in this class. ठीक है? So अभी क्या करेंगे? We'll see the headquarter. What is the headquarter? That can come as a question. Headquarter of the Reserve Bank of India is in Mumbai, and the incumbent governor is Urjit R Patel. तो ये दो चीज़ें हैं करंट अफेयर, एक तो स्टैटिक जीके है कि हेडक्वार्टर कहाँ पे है रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया का. तो आंसर इज द हेडक्वार्टर इज इन मुंबई, एंड द इनकम्बेंट गवर्नर ऑफ the Reserve Bank of India is Urjit Patel. When Reserve Bank of India was formed in the beginning, when it was established in 1935. Now can you answer this question? When Reserve Bank of India was established in 1935, was its headquarter in Mumbai or it was in some other city? Right, Mumbai that time was called Bombay. Then which city was the headquarter? The answer for that question, we have discussed this also earlier in our videos. Initially the headquarter of Reserve Bank of India was in the city that is Kolkata. Today we know it is Kolkata, that time it was Calcutta. So the headquarter was in Calcutta, and in 1937 it was shifted to Mumbai. That's earlier it was known as Bombay. So वो एक question है जो आपको पता होना चाहिए थोड़ा RBI के history के बारे में. So we have discussed RBI history earlier also in detail. Now यहाँ पे एक quick review हो रहा है. अच्छा, RBI का structure क्या है? How does RBI work? What are the board members? And what are the key, what is the structure of the board? बोर्ड जो है उसका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कैसे होता है वो आप थोड़ा यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं. ये भी एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन के फॉर्म पे आ सकता है आपको. सो जो सेंट्रल बोर्ड है आरबीआई का, उसमें 21 मेंबर्स है. दैट्स वन क्वेश्चन. हाउ मेनी मेंबर्स आर देयर इन द सेंट्रल बोर्ड ऑफ आरबीआई? द आंसर इज 21 मेंबर्स. इनका ब्रेकअप कैसे होता है वो आप देखिए पहले. फर्स्ट इज द गवर्नर, जो की द हेड ऑफ आरबीआई. You can say the chief person who is the overseer of RBI is the governor. Under the governor there are 4 deputy governors to assist him. One governor plus 4 deputy governors. Then we have 10 government nominated directors. These 10 directors come from various sectors of our country and represent all the sectors in the Reserve Bank of India. Clear? तो एग्रीकल्चर हो गया, इंडस्ट्री हो गया, हर सेक्टर में से एक दो लोग आते हैं, एंड दे फॉर्म द 10 गवर्नमेंट नॉमिनेटेड डायरेक्टर्स टू रिप्रेजेंट द इंडस्ट्री. देन 2 फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री रिप्रेजेंटेड, 2 गवर्नमेंट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स. द 2 फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स आर देयर, एंड 4 डायरेक्टर्स टू रिप्रेजेंट लोकल बोर्ड्स, नॉर्थ, साउथ, ईस्ट एंड वेस्ट. ये 4 जोन्स है, उसमें से 4 डायरेक्टर्स होते हैं, अगेन गवर्नमेंट अपॉइंटेड डायरेक्टर्स हैं, and they represent the local boards. The regional necessities and needs are represented in the Reserve Bank of India's board by these 4 directors from local boards of Reserve Bank of India, north, south, east, west. चारों जोन से एक लोग होते हैं जो रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं. Now you see here, governor is Urjit R Patel. So the question right now, who is the governor of the Reserve Bank of India? The answer is Urjit R Patel. Now 4 deputy governors are BP Kanungo, then we have N Vishwanathan, Viral Acharya and Mahesh Kumar Jain. So who among the following is not one of the 4 deputy governors? Like this we can frame a question. We give you a name of 3 persons who are deputy governors and 1 person who is not. Clear? So that's how we can answer, ask a question in the examination regarding the deputy governors of Reserve Bank of India. Now next we should also know that 2 finance ministry representatives are usually economic affairs secretary and financial services secretary. It is the norm that is always followed, that the two persons who are the finance minister representatives, who will be these two persons? Whoever is the economic affairs secretary and whoever is the financial services secretary will be the two finance ministry representatives representing the government directly in the board of RBI. Clear? Now, a little bit more about RBI. Right now we know the governor is Urjit R. Patel, but can you tell me who was the first governor of RBI? Suppose this question comes in the examination. Who was the first governor of RBI? The first governor of RBI. Now, the question would then be whether we are talking about pre-independence era or we are talking about post-independence. So, that is one question that we need to be very careful about. If nothing is mentioned in the question, that means we are taking all things together and we are just asking in general who is the first governor of RBI. So, pre-independence answer will be different, post-independence answer will be different. In fact, we can even say first Indian governor of RBI, even that is the question, the first Indian governor of RBI. Now, what will be the answer for the question is the first governor of RBI. Overall, if the question is asked, the first governor of RBI is Osborne Smith. Who is the first governor? Osborne Smith. That means when RBI was formed, he was the governor. We normally say, see in different sources, his name is Sir Osborne Smith. After that, one more governor was there, James Braid Taylor, and after that the first Indian governor of RBI in 1948 itself, you can say C.D. Deshmukh. So, C.D. Deshmukh became the first governor of RBI in the year 1946, and he continued to be the governor of RBI post independence also. So, you can say the first governor of RBI post independence is C.D. Deshmukh. First Indian governor of RBI, answer is still C.D. Deshmukh. Who is the first governor of RBI? The answer will be Sir Osborne Smith. Now, these are some of the questions that you need to be familiar with. Now, if suppose the question comes, which governor has the longest term? Which governor of RBI has served the longest, or which had the longest term? Then what will be the answer? And which governor had the shortest term? Which RBI governor had the shortest term in the RBI as a governor of RBI? Suppose these two questions are there. What will be the answer for the first question and the answer for the second question? So, if you see here, the longest term is Benegal Rama Rao. This you can remember, Benegal Rama Rao is the 7 years. So, what is the longest term? 7 years. He remained as the governor of RBI for 7 years, and the shortest term is Amitav Ghosh. Amitav Ghosh has the distinction of being the RBI governor who has served RBI for the shortest term. And what is the shortest term that we should know? 20 days. He was the governor of RBI for only 20 days. Clear? So, some of these can also be a kind of a static GK question from Reserve Bank of India. Who was the first governor of RBI? Who was the first Indian governor of RBI? Who was the first governor of RBI post independence? Who is governor of RBI had the shortest term? Which governor of RBI had the longest term? Like this, also one question based on the governors of RBI can come. So, what we have seen right now is the central board. The central board has 21 members, including the governor, that is 1, 4 deputy governors, 4 plus 1 5, 10 government nominated directors to represent different industries of India, 2 finance ministry representatives, and 4 directors to represent local boards. Next, we will look at the RBI functions. What are the key functions of RBI? So, if you see, the first one is the issue of currency, that all of us understand. Before RBI was formed, even in pre-independence era, before Reserve Bank of India was established, there were 3 presidency banks in our country. one in Kolkata, one in Mumbai, one in Chennai. Earlier the name of these places were Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. So we had the Presidency Bank of Calcutta, Presidency Bank of Madras and Presidency Bank of Bombay, and each of these presidency banks was working as the issuer of currency in the country. If you look at the pre-independence notes of India, you will see some notes having the seal of the Presidency Bank of Bombay, some of them had the seal of the Presidency Bank of Calcutta, and others had seal of Presidency Bank of Madras. Now to make it all single and to centralize the banking scene in India, clear, Reserve Bank of India was formed, clear. So you can see here one of the key functions of RBI right from its inception, स्टार्टिंग से ही जो एक मेजर काम कर रहा है आरबीआई वो है प्रिंटिंग एंड सर्कुलेटिंग करेंसी इन द कंट्री। दो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, एक है SPMCIL और एक है BNB। वन सेकेंड, it is BRB, NM, NMPL. Okay, so these are the two main. One is SPMCIL, Securities Printing and Minting Corporation of India Limited. Securities Printing and Minting, CIL stands for Corporation of India Limited. So SPM is for Securities Printing and Minting, and BRB here stands for basically Reserve Bank of India in Hindi, Bharatiya Reserve Bank. Note, N is for note, M is for mudran, P is for private and L is limited. So these are the you can say the subsidiaries of RBI which are charged with printing and circulating notes in our country. They have their offices in different parts of our country, like Hoshangabad is there, then we have the currency printing press in Nasik, clear. So different places are there in our country where we have our currency printing presses, and through those places the Reserve Bank of India prints and circulates currency in our country. Okay, now that is one of the main functions of RBI. Next function of RBI is to be the banker to the government. RBI is a banker to the government. So RBI provides banking services to the government of India by managing its accounts. So RBI is the one who manages accounts for the government, accepting and disbursing payments of the government, raising capital through government bonds and securities. So that is also something that the Reserve Bank of India is authorized to do as a primary seller of government bonds and securities through the open market operations of RBI. The RBI will raise money for the government, clear. So working as a banker to the government. Now also RBI works as banker to banks in our country. When banks are in need of money, now when we need money we go to banks. What will happen when banks need money? Because banks have frequent requirement of liquidity, day to day work also they have liquidity crunch and they need to borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India through the interbank rate facilities, and for long term also for expansion and development of more branches banks need money. So when banks need money, from whom do they borrow? They borrow from the Reserve Bank of India, clear. So banker to banks, when RBI is the banker to banks, it provides financial assistance to bank. It also works as a regulatory body to regulate banking in our country. So if something key interest rate has to be launched, some of the primary rates are controlled by RBI. RBI also gives guidelines on how banks have to function, what kind of capital adequacy ratio banks have to maintain, that is what is CAR, and we also call it as CRAR, capital to risk weighted assets ratio. So all of these things are regulated by Reserve Bank of India. Also whenever there is a license given for a commercial bank, a scheduled bank, then who will be the licensing authority? Reserve Bank of India will be the licensing authority. If Reserve Bank of India does not give a license to a particular bank, that bank cannot be called as a scheduled bank or scheduled commercial bank, and then it will not be listed in the second schedule of RBI. So it regulates banking in our country, it sets guidelines for banks in our country, it also provides financial assistance to banks in our country. So for both short term and long term requirements, banks borrow money from Reserve Bank of India. Also, banks can deposit or park their money in RBI. All banks of India have their accounts in RBI. Clear? Suppose a bank has surplus liquidity with it, what it can do is, under the reverse repo rate arrangement, it can give money to Reserve Bank of India, clear, and earn interest based on that. So banks can also deposit money and earn interest by depositing money in RBI. So it's one of the major functions of RBI is to work as a banker to banks. Now controller of credit. RBI controls credit in the country by different quantitative tools such as, now what are the tools? Bank rate, now we will be discussing these rates one by one. SLR, that is statutory liquidity ratio, then we have CRR, right, cash reserve ratio, then we have repo rate, etc. These are the different quantitative tools through which RBI controls credit. Controls credit means what? Now suppose RBI wants to make it easier for people to borrow money, for banks to borrow money from RBI, and if banks can borrow money easily from RBI, then they can also give money, lend money to people at a lower interest rate. Clear? Similarly, if it's difficult for banks to borrow money from RBI, RBI is giving money to banks at a higher interest rate, then banks will also give loans to people at a higher interest rate. When interest rates of loans are lower, then people are encouraged to take interest, take more credit, and thereby increase the consumption in the country. Clear? Loans are cheaper, more people will buy homes, more people will buy cars, and other things will also become easier. Secondly, if loans are expensive, if interest rates are higher, people will have less incentive in taking loan. They will be a little reluctant in taking loans, and they will wait for the interest rates to come down, thereby reducing the credit in our country, but it also reduces consumption. Now these things are done by Reserve Bank of India to control inflation, to control the, or what is called as manage the liquidity in the market. Clear? So it's one of the functions. We say controller of credit, we basically mean that RBI is managing liquidity in the market. Now liquidity is anything that is easily convertible into cash, that can be converted into cash is called liquidity, whether it's gold, it's money, there's securities, all of these things are called as liquidity, and RBI's job is to control and manage liquidity in the country to make sure that the economy is stable. Now let's see here what is the another regulator of banking industry. Obviously RBI, as I discussed earlier also, in addition to being banker to banks, where RBI gives money to banks and also accepts deposit from banks, RBI also regulates the banking industry by different measures to bring in financial stability, to improve the quality of capital in our country, and manager of foreign exchange. Now this is also one of the roles of RBI, manages the foreign exchange through the Foreign Exchange Management Act, FEMA. This act is called as FEMA, come as an abbreviation question in your examination. What is the full form of FEMA? The answer is Foreign Exchange Management Act. It was passed in which year? In 1999. So these are the principal functions of RBI. Now let's look at a little bit about the RBI rates and ratio to have a clear understanding about these things. So first of all, we have CRR, cash reserve ratio. What is the CRR? You see, to make sure that banks don't use up every total cash that they have, and that there is some cash left with the banks to meet situations of urgency, Reserve Bank of India makes it mandatory for banks to keep some amount, some percentage of their liquidity, right, in the Reserve Bank of India. This is called as CRR. Now this is the amount that banks cannot touch, they have to maintain with the Reserve Bank of India. Now as I had discussed earlier, while talking about the liberalization phase and the changes brought in during the liberalization phase, as a result of the recommendations of the Narasimhan Committee Report 1. Okay. We had seen that earlier repo rate was very high, 18 to 20% repo rate was there. That means out of the total money that banks have, 20% was something that they could not touch, so they had less money left with them that they could use for giving loans. Clear? So it is a quantitative method for what? For credit control. Cash reserve ratio is a percentage, usually 3% to 15% of a bank's NDTL. What is NDTL? Net demand and time liability. Now this again I will be discussing with you. What is NDTL? Net demand and time liability. First of all, what is the liability for the bank? When you as a depositor give some money to a bank, that becomes a liability for the bank because the bank is liable to pay it back to you. Clear? Now there are two types of deposits. One is a savings deposit, one is the फिक्स डिपॉजिट और व्हाट इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड एज टर्म डिपॉजिट. ठीक है, दो तरह का डिपॉजिट होते हैं. नॉर्मली आप बैंक में जाएंगे तो सेविंग्स डिपॉजिट होता है या फिक्स डिपॉजिट. तो सेविंग्स डिपॉजिट है, उसमें से आप पैसे जब चाहे निकाल सकते हैं बैंक वर्किंग आवर्स में या बैंक के वर्किंग आवर्स के बाद भी थ्रू एटीएम. क्लियर? तो वो जो पैसा है आपका आप डिमांड कर सकते हैं. यू कैन डिमांड फॉर योर डिपॉजिट, दैट्स व्हाई इट्स कॉल्ड एज डिमांड डिपॉजिट. वेयर एज अ फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट is something that is locked in for a period of time. आपने एक फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट अकाउंट खोला बैंक में, कुछ पैसे डाले 5 साल के लिए. अब वो 5 साल के लिए वो फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट है, आप उसको 5 साल के बाद निकाल सकते हो. उसके बीच में निकालोगे तो भी आप निकाल सकते हो, पर कुछ उसमें फाइन लगता है. तो एटलीस्ट यहाँ पे क्या है कि वो टाइम के लिए फिक्स्ड है. दिस इज अ टाइम लाइबिलिटी. दैट्स व्हाई वी से नेट डिमांड एंड टाइम लाइबिलिटी. क्लियर? That banks must always maintain. So it's 3 to 15%. That's the range of the CRR. Present CRR is at 4%. So if the question comes in examination कि अभी CRR क्या है, the answer will be 4%. The present CRR is 4%. Again full form क्या है? Cash reserve ratio. It is a percentage of the net demand and time liability. The range is from 3 to 15%. The present CRR is 4%. Next comes the statutory liquidity ratio. ये SLR क्या है? Right? Now SLR ऐसे आप समझिए कि आप कुछ पैसे हैं, आपके घर का एक बजट है, मंथली आपके कुछ खर्च होते हैं, तो उस हिसाब से कुछ पैसे आप अलग कर देते हैं कि this much money we will not touch. That is what is called as statutory liquidity ratio. Every bank is required to maintain some of its liquidity, some percentage of its liquidity which it cannot use for lending to others, so that it is there with the bank at all points of time, again for requirement of depositors. So quantitative method for again credit control. अगर बैंक जो है वो पैसे नहीं यूज कर पाएगा तो कम लोन दे पाएगा. अगर हम SLR को बढ़ा देते हैं, that means we are decreasing the ability of banks to give credit. And if we reduce SLR, the percentage, that means we are increasing the ability of banks to give credit. That's why it's a quantitative method. It's a percentage. So it's a quantitative method of what? Credit control. Statutory liquidity ratio SLR is a percentage of NDTL. Now what is NDTL? Already I have discussed with you. That banks must always maintain with it in form of liquid assets. What are liquid assets? Gold, securities and cash. The current SLR is 19.5%. That is 19.5% of the total deposit that the bank has, the bank cannot use for giving loans. It must always maintain with itself in the form of liquidity, gold, securities or cash. So right now it is 19.5%. Initially when I discussed with you the liberalization phase in 1990, 1989, SLR was up to 28 to 30%. 30%, 35% of the total liquidity, the total deposit of a bank was something that the banks could not use. That is why it was so difficult then to get loans from banks. तो ये दो चीज़ हमने डिस्कस कर लिया काफ़ी अच्छे से. क्या होता है SLR, फुल फॉर्म क्या है, करंट रेट क्या है, एंड इट्स अ परसेंटेज ऑफ व्हाट? NDTL. Now LF, liquidity adjustment facility, was introduced in 1999. What is LF? Liquidity adjustment facility. It helps banks manage their daily liquidity requirements. इसके लिए बनाया गया बैंक्स के डेली लिक्विडिटी रिक्वायरमेंट्स को मैनेज करने के लिए. अभी बैंक्स को कुछ पैसे चाहिए होते हैं और सपोज द बैंक डज नॉट हैव सफिशिएंट लिक्विडिटी and they want some money urgently, then they can increase or raise liquidity by borrowing from RBI. And if banks have surplus liquidity, they can use that surplus liquidity by depositing with RBI or giving loan to other banks in the interbank market. Clear? Now through LAF, banks can borrow money from RBI for short term needs through repurchase agreements. The two repurchase agreements are repo rate and reverse repo rate. So ये दो चीजें हैं जो कि काफी इंपॉर्टेंट है आपके बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री की नॉलेज के लिए. एक है रेपो रेट और एक है रिवर्स रेपो रेट. करंट रेपो रेट इज 6.5% and reverse repo rate is 6.25%. Reverse repo rate is always less than the repo rate by 100 basis points. It will always be less than the repo rate. So current repo rate is 6.5%. Current means what? I am talking about as latest as October, November 2018. That means the latest figures I am giving to you, October, November 2018. The current repo rate is 6.5%. RBI changed its repo rate in the month of June. It increased repo rate from 6% to 6.5%. RBI was further expected to increase the repo rate in the month of September, but RBI did not do it and it maintained the same repo rate. Clear? Now let's see what is the difference between repo rate and reverse repo rate. So we have seen repo rate and reverse repo rate come under the liquidity adjustment facility of RBI, through which it helps banks manage their liquidity. Repo rate is the rate at which RBI lends money to banks, and reverse repo rate is the rate at which RBI borrows money from banks. So first of all the basic difference है वो ये है कि रेपो रेट के थ्रू बैंक्स आरबीआई से पैसे लेते हैं और रिवर्स रेपो रेट के थ्रू बैंक्स आरबीआई को पैसे देते हैं. ठीक है. सो एक ये चीज हो गया जो आप समझ सकते हैं. एंड रेपो रेट इज ऑलवेज हायर देन रिवर्स रेपो रेट एंड रिवर्स रेपो रेट इज ऑलवेज लोअर देन रेपो रेट. नाउ व्हाट इज रेपो रेट यूज्ड फॉर टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन? सपोज inflation is more. What is the meaning of inflation? Inflation means increase in the price of goods and services. ठीक है. वो कब होता है? जब लोग ज़्यादा सामान खरीद रहे हैं. आप समझिए बहुत लोग हैं, सबको सामान खरीदना है. If so much demand is there and supply is less, what will happen? The price will start going up. When there is more demand, less supply, people start buying more and more. They are buying more and more. So as people start buying more and more homes, there is a greater demand for homes. You will see the price of homes going up. Clear? So this is what happens in most of the other things also. So this is what is called as inflation. So how can RBI play a role here? RBI can make it difficult for people to buy. So consumption कम कर सकते हैं RBI. कैसे? By increasing repo rate. Now if RBI is increasing repo rate, banks are borrowing money at a higher rate. They are lending money at a higher rate. People will stop buying. Thereby consumption will come down. Demand will come down. When demand comes down, meet supply, the price will also come down. तो इस तरह से through repo rate RBI controls inflation. Although there is a negative aspect to it, when consumption comes down, production also suffers, and gradually if it continues coming down, consumption continues coming down, then the country can move into recession, negative growth, and that can again be counterproductive for the economy of a country. Now it is used repo rate, reverse repo rate RRR, used to control money supply, liquidity के लिए कम. If excess money supply is there, Reserve Bank of India wants to suck out that money from the market. It uses the reverse repo rate. By increasing reverse repo rate, Reserve Bank of India is giving some incentive, some motivation to the other banks, so that they can then deposit their money with RBI, because RBI is the safest place to deposit your money. The main objective is to deal with deficiency in funds, मतलब banks के लिए, not RBI. Main objective of repo rate is for dealing with deficiency of funds. Banks के पैसे नहीं है, urgent requirement है, clear? So overnight they can borrow money through repo rate through RBI, and main objective is to deal with liquidity in the economy. जब ज़्यादा पैसे हैं इकोनॉमी में तो उसको हैंडल करने के लिए, मैनेज करने के लिए रिवर्स रेपो रेट यूज होता है. Now what does repo rate involve? It involves sale of securities which will be repurchased in the future. इस रीपर्चेज अग्रीमेंट है बैंक और आरबीआई के बीच में, ये रीपर्चेज एग्रीमेंट से ही नेम आया है रेपो. क्लियर? So what do banks do? Suppose they have excess surplus government securities above their SLR, statutory liquidity ratio के ऊपर में अगर गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज है बैंक्स के पास, तो बैंक्स वो सिक्योरिटी आरबीआई को बेच सकता है विद अग्रीमेंट ऑफ रीपर्चेजिंग दो सिक्योरिटीज बैक फ्रॉम आरबीआई. Under this they can borrow money from RBI. This is what is called as repo rate. And reverse repo rate involves transfer of money from one account to another. That means our banks are transferring money from their account to RBI's account. That is reverse repo rate. ठीक है, तो ये काफी डिटेल में हम समझ चुके हैं डिफरेंस बिटवीन रेपो रेट एंड रिवर्स रेपो रेट. दो और की रेट्स हैं, एक है बैंक रेट और एक है MSF, मार्जिनल स्टैंडिंग फैसिलिटी. So bank rate is a rate at which RBI lends money to commercial banks, but यहाँ पे pledging और selling government securities are not required. Usually bank rate is a rate at which banks borrow money from RBI for a longer duration, whereas repo rate is for shorter duration, overnight to 1 day. Any increase in bank rate by RBI results in an increase in bank lending rates. The current bank rate is 6.75%. Unlike repo rate, bank rate does not require banks to pledge securities to RBI. तो ये मेन फर्क है. Suppose you don't have surplus securities and you want to borrow money from RBI, how will you do that? Through bank rate. Also for long term you will have to borrow money from RBI at bank rate. Repo rate is a short term money market instrument. वो एक दिन का है. 0 to 1 day borrowing के लिए इंटर बैंक रेट के लिए रेपो रेट यूज होता है. ओके, सो बैंक रेट जो यहाँ पे है, it is always, you can see 6.75% higher than the repo rate. Now marginal standing facility was introduced on 9th May 2011. So एक ये question है, what is the full form of MSF? The answer is marginal standing facility. When was it introduced? In 2011. तो एक ये बहुत important point है यहाँ पे कि ये भी एक जीके में question आ सकता है. And like repo and reverse repo, it is an option where banks borrow money from RBI by pledging government securities. अब ये कैसे होता है, डिफरेंस क्या है फिर रेपो रेट में और मार्जिनल स्टैंडिंग फैसिलिटी में? रेपो रेट में भी प्लेज कर रहे हैं गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज और मार्जिनल स्टैंडिंग में भी प्लेज कर रहे हैं. Now in repo rate there is a sale of government securities to RBI with an agreement to repurchase. But यहाँ पे in marginal standing facility the government securities is being used as a collateral. ठीक है, as a mortgage, as a collateral against the money that the banks are borrowing under the MSF facility. एक और बात समझिए MSF में क्या होता है. MSF, suppose a bank needs money, if they have surplus government securities above their SLR, then they can sell those government securities to RBI and raise money through repo rate. But what if banks don't have surplus securities? Then how will they raise money for a short term liquidity requirement? तब वो क्या कर सकते हैं, फ्रॉम देयर SLR, the statutory liquidity ratio में भी some liquidity is there in the form of gold, cash and securities which banks cannot use. So from their SLR they can borrow money. This is what is called the one of the major differences between MSF and SLR. And you see MSF is always 100 points above repo rate. ये भी आप देख लीजिए, MSF is always 100 basis point above repo rate. And 1% of how much they can borrow, there is a limit also, no? How much they can borrow under their repo rate, not more than 1% of their NDTL, net demand and time liability. And what is the current marginal standing facility? 6.75% is the current marginal standing facility. Now what are the open market operations of RBI? Now this is something that is studied more in detail when you study finance. Now in open market operations RBI deals with government securities. So this is an option where RBI can sell government securities in open market to control the supply of money in banking system. When there is excess supply of money, central bank sells government securities, thereby taking away liquidity from the market. Okay. And when liquidity is tight, when there is less liquidity in market, RBI will buy government securities and thereby inject money into the economy. Also through selling the government securities RBI can create money for the government. तो दो चीजें हो रही है ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशन के साथ. लिक्विडिटी मैनेज किया जा रहा है, ठीक है. When the surplus liquidity, RBI starts selling government securities. That see, you buy government securities, you invest your money in government securities, and you can earn interest on that because everyone would want to park their money in government securities. That's the safest investment opportunity. तो लिक्विडिटी जो है मार्केट से जब लोग सिक्योरिटीज खरीदना चालू करेंगे तो पैसा लोगों से और बैंक से मूव करके आरबीआई का पैसा लग जाएगा. तो मार्केट में लिक्विडिटी कम होगी, डिमांड कम हो जाएगा. तो कंट्रोलिंग लिक्विडिटी एक वो चीज़ है. दूसरा है कि सपोज मार्केट में डिमांड कम हो गया, कंजम्पशन कम हो गया, ग्रोथ कम है, बैंक्स पैसा दे नहीं रहे हैं लोगों को, लोग पैसे खर्च नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो लिक्विडिटी बहुत कम है, ग्रोथ नेगेटिव चला जा रहा है, प्रोडक्शन रुक गया है, एंड ओवरऑल इकोनॉमी स्टैग्नेंट हो गया है. तो इंजेक्ट लिक्विडिटी इन द मार्केट, आरबीआई विल सेल द लिक्विडिटीज. सो नाउ यू कैन sell will buy, RBI will buy means banks will sell, you will start selling your liquidity, RBI will buy liquidity and thereby take the government securities from you and give you the liquidity, inject liquidity in the market. And this is also how through open market operations RBI will control liquidity in our country. So we have seen in detail lot of important aspects about RBI, brief overview of RBI, its headquarters, its governor, the structure of RBI board, little bit of static GK regarding the first governor of RBI and all those other things that I discussed with you. Core functions of RBI along with two subsidiaries, BRB and MPL and SPM CIL, which normally print and circulate notes in our country. Then also we have seen important rates and ratios. Rates and ratios are very critical for your examination. 2-3 questions can come from rates and ratios alone. Alright. So I covered for you RBI functions and rates and ratios. Go through the video, make sure that all the points are clearly noted down and understood. It's a very important topic for you. Now is the time for the class practice pack. Those who have passport access will start solving the questions. The question that most of you have doubts and you get wrong, I will be discussing in my next session on banking awareness. So best of luck to you for your examination and thank you for watching the video.